Hello everyone, this is Harper and welcome to our third lecture on the cardiovascular system. First, when we give you a kind of an introduction to the system, its purposes, its major parts. Remember, its major parts are the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood. The second lecture we talked about the heart. Remember, it has four chambers and has valves and the blood vessels that bring blood in and out of the heart. And it is the motor. It is what pumps the blood around your body. So today I want to talk to you about the blood vessels that actually carry the blood and the three major kinds of vessels, how they're different, how they're similar, and what they do and how they're built. So let's get started. So blood vessels are literally nothing more than tubes that transport your blood. So their function is transport blood and carry out the exchange of gases and waste. And that exchange occurs between the blood vessel, the blood that's in the blood vessel, and the cells of the body. Things leave the blood to go into the cells, like oxygen and nutrients and hormones. Things leave the cells and go into the blood. Hormones from cells that make that actual hormone goes into the blood. And then when it gets to the cell that needs that hormone, it goes into the cell. Waste products like carbon dioxide, waste products like metabolic waste go into the blood. The blood takes the carbon dioxide back to the lungs. It takes the metabolic waste to your kidneys where it's filtered out, becomes part of your urine. Another function of blood vessels is to help regulate your blood pressure. Blood vessels have muscle around them called smooth muscle, part of the walls of the blood vessel itself. And if your blood pressure starts to drop a little bit lower than normal, just a tiny bit, your blood vessels, the muscles will tighten and make the blood vessel a little smaller. And that raises your blood pressure by forcing that blood into a smaller area. And if your blood pressure starts to get too high, the muscles will relax and the blood vessel gets a little bigger and your blood pressure drops. And this is happening all the time to keep your blood pressure in a normal range. So let's talk about arteries. Those are the functions. Now let's talk about arteries themselves. Arteries are blood vessels which almost always carry oxygen-rich blood away from the heart to the body. The definition of an artery, it always carries blood away from the heart, and it's almost always oxygen-rich. There's one exception. The aorta is the largest artery in your body, so here's your typical artery. It has a couple of layers. There's a layer of smooth muscle in an artery. There's a inside layer called the endothelium. There's an outside layer too. Arteries have thick walls. They're elastic, and they carry high blood pressure. So those walls are thick because when the heart beats, it pushes blood out the heart into the arteries, because remember, arteries carry blood away from the heart. Since arteries come out of the heart, each time that heart beats, it forces blood out, and that raises the blood pressure. So the artery walls have to be thick or they could bust. They're also elastic. They can stretch and expand. Each time the heart beats, arteries expand and get a little bit bigger to deal with that pressure. And then when the heart relaxes, they go back to their normal size, and then it beats again and they go back out. So they're expanding, contracting all the time with each heartbeat and each heart relaxation in order to deal with the high pressures of the blood coming out of the heart. There's one exception to the fact that the arteries carry oxygen-rich blood, and that is the pulmonary artery. It carries blood from the heart to the lungs, and since it's going to the lungs, it's going to the lungs to get oxygen. The definition of an artery is a blood vessel that carries blood away from the heart, and the pulmonary artery is carrying blood away from the heart, but it's going to the lungs, so it doesn't have oxygen in the blood, much oxygen at least, and it's going to go to the lungs to get that oxygen. All other arteries carry blood that is high in oxygen except for the pulmonary. Next, let's talk about capillaries. So blood leaves the heart on arteries. Here they are. You start out with one big artery, the biggest one, the aorta, and then it branches and it becomes two smaller arteries, and then it branches again, becomes two smaller arteries. They get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until finally they reach the smallest blood vessels, the capillaries. And here they are. Capillaries are the most numerous blood vessels. They're the smallest. They are microscopic. I could have a capillary in my hands and hold it as wide as my arms go, one end of the capillary in my right hand, one end of my left hand, and you say, hey, you see this capillary? It's like 4 feet long. And you would say no, because it might be 4 feet long, but it's so tiny that you can't see it. It's so tiny around. In fact, the capillaries are so small that the blood cells are forced to go through the capillaries in single file. They're so small. Capillaries connect the arteries to the veins. You notice something in this picture. The blood going into the capillaries is red. Going out of the capillaries, it's blue. This is where the blood gives oxygen to the cells. The arteries are like big highways. And imagine a delivery truck on a highway. A delivery truck doesn't stop on a major freeway to drop something off. It goes to the side roads and ends up dropping things off. In the same way with your blood. Blood moving through arteries is not dropping off oxygen or picking up carbon dioxide. That all happens in these little small blood vessels called the capillaries. And there are capillaries that run to every single cell of your body, because every single cell needs that blood supply. So this is the exchange point. This is the big thing that happens in the capillaries. Oxygen leaves the blood, goes into the cells. Carbon dioxide leaves the cells, goes into the blood. Food, nutrients, leaves the blood, gets into the cells. Other waste products leave the cells, get into the blood. This is the exchange point. The walls of capillaries are very, very, very thin to let this happen. In fact, these walls are one cell layer. That's all they are, thick. Now, third kind of blood vessel are veins. So we've left the heart on arteries, then we go into the capillaries, then we go into the veins. Veins carry blood back to the heart. Veins have very thin walls because the blood pressure is much lower in veins. They're further away from the heart. So the blood pressure is low, so the walls of the arteries, of the veins don't need to be thick because they're not going to bust the way an artery would if it wasn't thick. And except for the pulmonary veins, all veins carry deoxygenated blood, which is a fancy way of saying blood low in oxygen. Remember, a vein is a blood vessel that carries blood back to the heart. The pulmonary veins carry blood from the lungs to the heart. So since they're going from the lungs to the heart, they're a vein, but because they've come from the lungs, they picked up oxygen in the lungs, so they have lots of oxygen. Only the pulmonary vein is the exception. All other veins carry blood low in oxygen. Veins have valves, like we learned in the video the other day, to prevent blood from flowing backwards. Here's a valve. Here's another picture of a valve and a valve. So the blood pressure is so low that muscles around the veins actually push and squeeze and push the blood up. And then the blood goes through a valve, and then the valve shuts. The valve only lets blood go in one direction. It can't go down this direction. And so these are little checks to keep the blood from falling back down any further, because the blood pressure is so low that the blood wants to go down according to gravity. So this would be like a vein bringing blood back up your leg from your feet. Pushes the blood up, then these valves shut off to keep the blood from going back down toward your feet. So we want to keep the blood moving up toward your heart. So I want to go back to this slide. So remember, the red blood cell in the video said it's a circulatory system, which he likes to call the circular system. And it is a circular system because blood leaves the heart and on arteries, goes through the capillaries, goes into a vein, goes back to the heart, gets back in arteries, through capillaries, veins, over and over and over and over and over again, a circular pattern of blood. It's a closed system, guys. Unless we have some kind of cut, blood never leaves those blood vessels. So, I'm going to stop right there. We're getting a little bit more on time. So we'll talk about the circulation of blood in the body the next time. So we've talked about the three major kinds of blood vessels: arteries, capillaries, veins. Arteries carry blood from the heart. Veins return blood to the heart. Capillaries connect arteries and veins, and it's the exchange point for all things between the cells and the blood. We'll talk more next time.